Hello and welcome to Seconds Out. I'm Joe Leigh. Alongside me is Flexen. And to celebrate the 1 year anniversary of Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury 2, Danny's kindly offered to sing Patsy Cline Crazy to welcome you all to the show. So over to you.
Crazy. There you
Well, that
go.
was actually unscripted. I didn't expect you to come out with that. So what a great welcome to the show, Danny.
I haven't got the pipes of Patsy Cline. I haven't even got the pipes of Tyson Fury. But what can you do? Yeah, I mean, it's a good. I'm glad you reminded me because obviously I knew it was in February, but I didn't realise it was today until you reminded me. And it's just the best victory by a British boxer overseas in many, many years. Probably the best since Fury's victory over Vladimir Klitschko. So he kind of beat his own landmark, if you like. But yeah, just I remember watching it at the time, just incredibly impressed and surprised. I'm not going to say I predicted it. I did think he'd win, but on points. Thought it'd be another close fight like the first one. I just thought he'd maybe stay out of trouble a bit better the second time round. Expected him to be quite safety first in his approach, despite what he was saying and what Sugar Hill Stewart was saying about working on power and being more aggressive. I thought it was mind games. I took it with a pinch of salt, as you often have to with Tyson Fury.
Yeah.
I'm sure he'd agree. But just the startling performance, both in how dominant he was and in the manner in which it was achieved.
The fact that he managed to knock out the biggest puncher in the division without taking any big blows in that second fight himself was just phenomenal. No one expected that. I mean, everyone from the first fight expected not Wilder to be the one with the threat of knocking him out at any moment. But the fact that Tyson Fury did what no one expected, even though we were saying the whole build up, the whole fight week, I'm going to knock Deontay Wilder out. We all thought it was just sort of to build up the hype of the fight, and obviously he joined the Kronk Gym, Sugar Hill Stewart, of course, to work on that power. But the way he planted that game plan to perfection, and in round 7 got that all important knockout was something that will go down in history for a long, long time. Obviously, we're sitting here talking about a year later, but I'm sure in many years to come, there'll be still many conversations about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not what Wilder would have been expecting or his team. I think that helped, but I think that style would have given Wilder problems regardless. But I think the fact that it was so unexpected as well only added to how uncomfortable he felt in there. I think from the start of the fight, he was put on the back foot. He didn't know what Fury was going to do. Great use of feints. And when Wilder, the rare occasions when he was able to get close or threaten, Fury was able to smother him really effectively as well. It was just a perfect performance by Fury, even more so than the Klitschko one, which he kind of nicked on a
Yeah,
weight soil, kind of fiddled his way to victory. This was domination. This
yeah.
was, supremacy. You've got to be careful with that word these days, obviously, but has other connotations. But just brilliant, brilliant performance from Fury. Credit to Sugar Hill Stewart as well. No one else had brought that side of Fury out. That's no disrespect to the people that have trained Fury in the past, but we've never seen him. Maybe it was just waiting for the right opponent to apply those tactics against. Maybe that's the only reason why we hadn't seen it much previously. But yeah, just a great all-round performance and the best British performance on overseas soil in a long, long time.
And the second the towel was thrown in by Mark Breland, began the excuses from Deontay Wilder, from it being stopped too early, from Fury putting weights in his gloves, to the drink being spiked with muscle relaxant, to Mark Breland eventually coming out and in the last few weeks actually,
Don't forget the costume.
and the costume being too heavy. Yeah, and Mark Breland come out in the last couple of weeks after he sacked him and just said how he can't even defend Deontay Wilder anymore. One thing I want to ask you now, because we've all obviously seen Deontay Wilder's excuses since the fight, is he a bit of a genius for making these up because it gives people more reason to want to see him being punched in the face for the third time by Tyson Fury? Is he building up that third fight already?
I think it's often been said that boxers, need a reason that they've lost. Because if
Yeah,
you're a boxer and you admit that you just got beaten by the better man, there's nothing different you could have done, then where do you go from there? How do you
yeah,
rebuild your confidence and carry on with your career? And I think the more successful you've been and the bigger your ego has become, the more important it then becomes to find those excuses. Now, if he'd have actually gone away and thought about it and maybe discussed it with his team, I'm sure he could have come up with more credible
yeah,
excuses. He could have talked about having an injury in camp, for
yeah,
example. He injured his hand. He wasn't able to get off with his right hand his toe, I mean, David Haye got mocked for it, but in comparison to the stuff Wilder's come out with, it's almost an honourable excuse that Haye said. And his toe was broken, you know, it was legit. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's been an intentional thing to sell the third fight. I think it's just a way of protecting a fragile ego that was completely unravelled by Tyson Fury, and he's had to come up with those excuses. And he's got a small core fan base who will accept them and promote them on his behalf. But I think the wider boxing community, it's not made them want to see a third fight more. It just makes them question Wilder's mental fragility now. And I think that means they're thinking a third fight is going to be even easier potentially than a second, if that's possible. So that goes against it being a more sellable third fight. But yeah, I guess people would like to see him lose again, but maybe not necessarily to Fury this time.
Yeah, and coincidentally, a couple of weeks back, I was just watching a video after the first fight of Deontay Wilder reacting to the knockdown in the last round, sorry, the 12th. And he said he sees Tyson Fury go up to the ropes after the fight, jumps on the ropes, and he says, "This is what you've got to do as a boxer. No matter what happens in the fight, if it goes to the scorecards, you've just got to act like you've won." And
Yeah.
I feel like in the same sense, in the same mindset, he's thinking, I've just lost this fight, and it's pretty clear. He knows he didn't deserve to stay in that fight, and it was right for the towel to be thrown in. But he's thinking, I still need to recover from this. I still need to box later on in my career, and I still need to have people who respect me. So there came the excuses, and it was interesting that I saw that video because I feel like he knew, regardless of what happened, he always wanted to come out with something just to keep some level of respectability. But yeah, I think he's lost that from a lot of people.
And that would only last as long as a third fight anyway. And that's the reason I think why he doesn't want a third fight, because there was a time limit they were waiting for before Fury moved on. Obviously, he never had that fight in the UK last year, as it turned out. But we were waiting and waiting, and now we're moving on to negotiations for AJ and Fury instead. But I think Wilder knew that if he exercised the rematch clause and took it, all the excuses he's made, all the myth that's built up around him, it's already been exposed once against Fury. That'd be the end of it. It might even be the end of his career if he lost to Fury in similar fashion again.
Yeah.
So I think it makes sense for him to go another route now and try and build his way back up against other fighters. And then maybe one day down the line, if Fury manages to get past AJ or whoever wins out of that fight, I think from Wilder's perspective, it's better if Fury comes out on top in that if Joshua comes out on top in that 2-fight series with Fury, because it's a fresh opponent. You could make a case for Wilder beating Joshua.
Yeah.
It's very hard now to make a case for Wilder beating Fury because of what we've seen unfold in front of our eyes. But you could say, well, he's never fought Joshua. Joshua has proved susceptible to a big punch in the past, unlike Fury, who got up against Wilder. Wilder's still a massive puncher. Maybe styles match up better against Joshua for Wilder. So he'll be hoping that Joshua comes out on top against Fury in that 2-fight series. And in the meantime, he's built himself back up as a scary knockout artist once more. And maybe that could happen down the line.
And it's no secret Anthony Joshua's offered Deontay Wilder that fight before. He'd definitely be open to having that fight after the 2-fight contract with Tyson Fury. So I think down the line, that's a huge fight. It's a big possibility as well. Like I say, they wanted that fight a couple of years back, so why wouldn't they want it if they become undisputed? And obviously that's now a bigger fight if it will be for the undisputed. However, as things stand, we have to wait for those 2 fights to happen, because if Deontay Wilder's obviously lost to Tyson Fury twice, but obviously once, and then Joshua loses to Tyson Fury, then the fight between Deontay Wilder versus Joshua is never big as it could have been.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one because Wilder lost so much of his standing from that fight, but he's still the number 3 heavyweight in the world. You can't put anyone else above him yet.
Obviously, he doesn't have a belt, and most people would say Joshua at the moment. But with the punch power, he can knock out anyone in his day.
Yeah, so you could make a case for him being number 2, although it wouldn't be a great case. But I would say he's no worse than number 3, because most people's consensus number 4 previously was Dillian Whyte, who lost his last fight, so he's not number 4 anymore. Yeah. Who else is knocking on the door? I guess the winner of Usyk and Joyce will be an interim champion and will be unbeaten. So maybe that could displace Wilder. Povetkin, if he repeats the victory.
Usyk hasn't proven himself yet. And if he doesn't look great against Joe Joyce, then I don't think Joe Joyce could even if he won, I don't think he could go up to number 4. Looking at it, if Dillian Whyte puts in a big performance on March the 27th now in Gibraltar, I feel like he just remain number 4. And he has to be next in line if he wins that. But
what if Povetkin beats Whyte again? Is he number 3? Because
I
in
think
recent years, he's only lost to Joshua. And he'd have beaten Whyte twice.
Yeah, it's a good shout.
Because obviously they were supposed to fight Wilder and
Wilder.
Povetkin, and that never happened because of the drug test failure. So I don't know. Then it becomes a tougher one.
And I think for Deontay Wilder, he could be looking at the winner of that fight. I mean, Povetkin Wilder does well, and so does Povetkin.
Well, he's already talked about Dillian Whyte, hasn't he, since all this happened? And I think he wasn't interested in Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte was chasing him.
And then
and now he's lost and he needs to regain his standing. Now he's interested in Dillian Whyte, which is interesting.
Yeah, but that's boxing, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose so, yeah.
And I think the perfect scenario for all of this is for Deontay Wilder to keep winning, because let's be honest, Anthony Joshua versus Deontay Wilder is one of the most exciting fights. It might not be the biggest, even if Joshua loses to Fury. It's still a big fight, and it's exciting because it's two boxers with a lot of punching power. And don't get me wrong, Joshua's shown now he can go the distance, he can box long, box on the outside. But I feel as if for the wider audience, a more exciting fight, in fact for everyone, most boxing fans, the most exciting fight is going to be Wilder versus Joshua.
Yeah, I'd quite like to see Wilder against Joyce. Like, if Joyce comes through against Usyk, I think that would be a great fight. You got the non-stop pressure of Joyce and a good chin against a massive power puncher in Wilder. I just think styles would mesh so well in that fight. And the winner of that has got a real claim then to being at least the number 3 heavyweight in the world, if not number 2.
Yeah, for Wilder, he's only a couple of wins off getting another shot at the belt. And if he beats some credible opponents as well, all he has to do is wait for Fury Joshua, and I think he could probably fight the winner just because he's such a big name. However, having said that, there are going to be a few angry fighters in line, as Usyk wants the WBO now, and I think he's been given step aside money because obviously it's going to be for the undisputed, and there's going to be Joyce at this point. Obviously they'll fight before actually, but there's going to be a few fighters who want that belt, so it's becoming harder for people to get a shot at that belt.
I mean, you would think that the Usyk Joyce winner will be elevated to full champion after the first
going to be them and
Joshua fight.
And Wilder will want a fight as well, but he's going to have to fight a couple of times, whether it's Brazil, whether it's who was he rumoured to fight the other day? Joshua.
Oh, Charles Martin.
Won the world title off him, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that'd just be an absolute joke of a fight. He doesn't gain anything from that. I mean, the UK.
But a lot of these guys that you would come back against, the kind of middling heavyweights, the likes of Brazil and Gerald Washington and people like that, Wilder knocked out when he was world champion. So he can't now knock him out as a comeback trail. Do you know what I mean? He needs fresh opponents.
Yeah.
So it's difficult. But then if he fights the younger guys coming through, the likes of a Hergovich or someone like that, or even, a wild card like a Michael Hunter, they're quite dangerous fights for him.
Michael Hunter 100%, but if he wants to get straight back into it and fight for a title as soon as next year, after those 2 big fights, then surely fighting someone like Andrew Ruiz or the Whyte Povetkin winner is the most sensible option.
Yeah, I don't know. I think he could get a straight shot at the WBO winner once they are the full WBO champion. I think that's a very sellable fight. I don't know if having beaten either Usyk or Joyce, the other guy will want to take on a dangerous assignment like Wilder as their first defence. But, that's a big fight. Usyk against Wilder is a big fight in the US. Joyce against Wilder is potentially a big fight on either side of the Atlantic.
But they're all great talking points. But to end the anniversary special, whatever we'll call it, do you ever think there will be a third fight between Wilder and Fury?
No. I think the second fight was just too clear, too conclusive a victory. I think it's like Froch Groves. Froch retired anyway, but I think even though the first fight was really close and controversial, and even the second fight was quite close up until the finish, the finish was so conclusive, few people were calling for a third fight. And in this case, it's not just the finish that was conclusive, the whole performance was dominant.
And also the aftermath with all the lawsuits, the excuses. It just makes people want to see the fight even less because it's just all that nonsense, that rubbish around it as well. And we don't
Also,
need.
Wilder could have forced it. He could have forced the third fight, but he wasn't ready at the time. He wanted to wait longer, whatever the reasoning. So if he was desperate for it, it could have already happened.
And I think it probably would end his career as well. Being beaten by someone twice, 3 times, it doesn't look good for him. And don't get me wrong, it's only one person. And if he goes on to beat Joshua, it's not embarrassing losing to the heavyweight champion of the world, undisputed. But it just doesn't look good. And I feel like, as Joshua did with Ruiz, if you're going to lose, then you need to avenge that loss straight away. And losing 2/3 times, I keep saying it, but to the same person, it's hugely detrimental.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Well, there we have it. I enjoyed this one. A big fight, February 22nd, a year ago today. And I've watched it once again in the last couple of days. It doesn't get old. And neither does the first fight, to be honest. Watching that knockdown in round number 12, Deontay Wilder blowing on his glove, and then Tyson Fury shocks the whole world and gets up, wins the rest of that 12th round, was just phenomenal to see. And it gets me more excited for the big fight that will hopefully be happening between AJ and Fury this year. Let us know what you think down below, and we'll speak to you all soon. Thank you very much.
Cheers.